Okay, good morning, everyone. We welcome you, Southern Plains Tribal Health Board, Tribal Epidemiology Center. This webinar is being sponsored by the Making Connections for Mental Health and Wellbeing Among Men and Boys in the U.S. grant. It is normally a mouthful to say. So for short, we either say Making Connections, or in-house we normally call it the Men's Health Grant. This grant is founded by Movember, the leading charity changing the face of men's health. And you can see their logo with the mustache on the screen. The title of this webinar is The Healing Season, Natives Men's Mental Health in 2021, Tools for Healing Instead of Dealing. And our presenter today is Dr. Daryl Tonamas. I will just briefly, if I can get my slides to move, was going to share with you Dr. Tonamas' bio. There we go. So Daryl Tonamas is Kiowa, Comanche, Tuscarora. Am I saying that right, Daryl? Sorry if I'm not. Daryl has a PhD in counseling psychology and cultural studies, a master's degree in community counseling, and 3 bachelor's of science degrees. He sat on numerous state and national boards addressing disparities in education and healthcare among the Native community, including the Oklahoma Cancer Network, the Cherokee Cancer Coalition, establishing the Oklahoma Intertribal Diabetes Coalition, establishing the Oklahoma Intertribal Cancer Coalition, the United National Intertribal Youth Diabetes Initiative. He has served on the ADA Board of Directors, as well as Research Policy Committee and the Native American Initiatives Committee. He has done extensive work training hospitals, clinics, universities, corporations, and schools in the US and Canada on trauma and its relationship to behavior and health. He is the owner of the Tonamas Consulting Group, an organization dedicated to increasing wellness in Native communities. He also owns First Nations Telehealth Solutions, a company dedicated to increasing access to psychological and psychiatric care to Native communities via telemedicine, and is the president of the Native Legacy Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowerment, programming, and suicide prevention in Native communities. He has also recorded 10 award-winning CDs, published research, published a book entitled Spray Your Swamp Cooler. He has appeared in numerous films and stage productions. He lives in Western New York with his wife and 3 children. Daryl, normally in the past, has been one of our keynote presenters at our Tribal Public Health Conference, and always does a great job and has a large drawing and gets great reviews. So Dr. Tonamas, we're very happy to have you presenting this webinar for us today, and we will turn it over to you. Just a few housekeeping things before we actually do that though. The webinar is from 9:30 to 11, and we will give you like a full hour, and then the extra 30 minutes or how much ever time is left now, we will give for Q&A. So to attendees, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat. We will be monitoring that. And then at the end, we will turn it over to Dr. Tonamas to answer any of those questions and to have some interaction. Dr. Tonamas, welcome, and we turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm coming to you today from Lewiston, New York. Just the Tuscarora Res is just up the hill right here. So you guys come on out and buy some gas, play bingo. I get to borrow you today just for a while to talk about men's health, men's mental health, behavioral health, which is during COVID season, it's become more prominent. And you know what? It's become more acceptable There's more, I'm hearing a lot more from men about how stress or anxiety has affected them during COVID season, because if we've had a lot of stuff previously, if we had stress, maybe kind of underlying previously, and then you add an ongoing stress like COVID, it kind of makes these things flare up a little bit. And so I'm talking to more folks saying I'm feeling a sense of stress or a sense of depression. I'm watching, when I'm watching TV, I can feel it. When I look at my kids, and I can attest to this myself. I got a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, there's an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old rather, and a 9. I should learn the ages of my kids: 16, 13, and 9-year-old. And as an adult male in my home, I look at my kids and I think, well, how do I protect them and how from COVID and things that are going on in the world, and almost feel bad sometimes about the world they're living in compared to the world that I grew up in. And there's some stress related to that as being the man of the house. And how do my sense of protection? And so I can feel that. I totally get that. And so I'm having folks who are in the health field or in teaching, they're in education, or just folks from the res who are just feeling it and giving me a call. And probably a third of them are adult males, which wasn't like that previously. I didn't hear, probably 80% up until COVID season of the work that I do had been with females, adult females. I do a lot of work with kids, but adult females was probably about 80%. But during COVID season, the stigmas have changed. That stress has been universal, and that stress can turn to anxiety or depression. And so that's just become universal. So being able to say, yeah, this is stressful for me, a lot of this is affecting me, that's okay now. And as men, that's really a big deal, because we lose a lot of men to health issues and disease related to stress. And if we as Native men can start leaning into that, we create a different set of outcomes for us. We have high rates of things you want to have high rates of, that can be addressed through, actually the core of it is how are we trying to de-stress. And a lot of it has to do with drinking or hitting or eating or smoking. A lot of external tools to try to deal with an internal event. And I'm just here to encourage us to say, well, let's have a new season in that. Let's try something different. So I'm just going to dive into this, and I only get to do like Susan was saying, I'll talk for about an hour or so, and then let's just have a dialogue time at the end. And I would love to hear from you if you have questions or comments or thoughts. I would love to know what other Native men are thinking about, because I'm just like you. We're all in this together. So when we talk about healing, going from dealing to healing, and I truly am down with that title, because we throw the word healing around loosely. We're going to have a healing run, but what did you heal? Actually, you probably injured something. But healing means it doesn't creep up on me anymore. It doesn't affect me anymore. It doesn't wake me up in the middle of the night. It doesn't make my heart pound when I'm driving to Walmart. Healing means those things aren't there anymore. They don't exist anymore. And we lean into healing instead of dealing, because dealing, just by nature, even just the idea of dealing just means I'm kind of postponing it. I'm delaying it, but eventually we're going to catch up to it. And even this lag time starts to feel stressful because we know that it's coming. When they say it, I'm thinking about, what does it feel like? What does your stress, your anxiety, your depression, what does that feel like? What's the sensation base underneath that we're labeling stress or anxiety? Because once we get to understand those things, we know what we're against, and we can start harnessing it better. when you start controlling it better, which is a sovereign moment. And when I talk about sovereign moments, we can think about cultural sovereignty, or we're in charge of our language and our government and our land base and our politics. That's cultural sovereignty. But a sovereign moment for myself is, do I have the capacity to be in control of even just my heartbeat in this moment? Can I slow that down enough for me to respond instead of react? And the more I do that, the more the body learns this, and I become weller. I start to heal because I've harnessed this thing that felt out of control before, that pushed me to drink, that pushed me to smoke, that pushed me to eat, to try to use external tools for an internal event. And that's where a lot of the symptoms of our unwellness show up. That's what takes us to the clinic, because maybe we're using that tool so much that we've gained weight and our blood sugars are out of control, or our cholesterol's out of control, or the drinking that I use as an external tool is starting to affect my life and my wife and my kids and my family, or the smoking I'm using as an external tool for this internal event, and it's starting to affect my lungs and my health. That's why we show up at the clinic. So we have symptoms that present as unwellness that has a core in this inability to harness this. So let's keep diving in. So healing doesn't mean the damage never happened. If there was abuses or any of the illicit abuses or poverty or alcoholism, things like that, it doesn't mean they never existed, because we're not going to go back and change that. What we can do is, in the present time, I have tools to make sure it's not controlling my life anymore. It's not controlling my health anymore. It's not controlling the decisions I make as a dad anymore. As I look at my 3 little chocolate kids, I don't want to have them live their lives because of the things that I didn't take care of myself. I grew up on Standing Rock in North Dakota. Dad was an IHS guy. He was a G-man. And so we started here in New York, and then we went to Oklahoma, went to Lawton. He worked at the clinic down there, the hospital down there. And then we went up to Fort Yates, Standing Rock, for about 8, 9 years. And when I was there, that was kind of my formative years. And I was this little chubby, round. I haven't always been the sexy dudes. So I was this little chubby, round kid with Captain Kangaroo hairdo. It was like Darth Vader's helmet kind of thing. And so I was meat. I would get wedgies and picked on, and every day. I dreaded the walk home from school. And me being this little teddy bear of a guy, and my mom used to call me that, yeah, my little teddy bear. And my only tool was sarcasm. That was my only defense, which actually, now that I think about it as a grown-up, it probably got me more wedgies than actually decreased the wedgies. But it became my tool. I would barb somebody, and then other people would laugh at that person. Then I could run away. That would be the defense. But our tools kind of become our go-to, whether it's drinking or smoking or eating or sarcasm. It becomes our go-to. And then I met my wife. Well, she wasn't my wife. I met this beautiful woman who became my wife. And we got married, and then we had Gracie, my daughter. And Carminda would say, "You are so sarcastic." And I didn't even know I was doing it. It was such a default. But it was affecting my relationship. And then I was listening to the radio one time down in Norman. And they were doing this interview with somebody, and they were talking about sarcasm, which I thought, yeah, maybe I'll get some doozies I can just steal. but sarcasm wasn't a good thing, apparently. And they said a sarcasm was like a Greek root or a Latin root or something like that. And it meant the tearing of the skin. It meant the tearing of the skin. And I thought, I don't want to tear my wife's skin, and I don't want to tear my baby daughter's skin. So I really had to work on these thoughts and the things that were coming out of my mouth, because healing doesn't mean the damage never occurred. It just means it's not going to control my life right now. I'm not going to curse my kids with that. I'm not going to curse my marriage with this. A part of it as the father or the husband, the role that I had stepped into, I had to decide, what am I bringing forward? What generational curses end with me? I got it. I like how I said it. I'm gonna say it again. What generational curses end with me? How can I stop this? And how can I raise my kids in strength and in power by being present and sober and with them and attuned to them? That's what's going to change. If I want to change the nation for my people, my clan, my tribe, it starts with me, and then it starts with my first circle, my home. So being present and being attuned is significant. Attunement isn't just, it's a very important word, because it helps brain function, it helps body function for the child. So a child, there's a part, or my kids, there's a part of their brain that looks at me for safety. Any child looks to the adult, to how to be in this moment. And it's looking to us for safety. And if I haven't done my own cooking, they're looking for me for safety, and it doesn't exist. And the child can't create that for themselves. So what that looks like in a child then is anxiety or ADHD or depression or stress or them shutting down. That's what it looks like in a child, because they can't look to the adult in the home as the safe space. So we don't have safety for them to borrow. And safety doesn't mean I will beat up anybody who looks at you cross-eyed. That's not safety to the child. The child needs to be attuned with, connected to the adult. That's just how God put us together. And so being able to borrow some of that from the adult, but the adult has to be okay, has to done their own cooking to be able to allow the child to access that. I'll dive more into that in a little bit. Let's keep going. So, in part of our healing as men, as a men's group, part of our healing is recognizing that the things that kind of put me on this path, in good ways and bad ways. But let's say the bad things are over. It's not occurring right now, but I'm doing the behaviors like they're still occurring, like me and my sarcasm. I'm doing the behaviors like they're still occurring. I was just, before I jumped on with you guys, I had clinic this morning. And I was just talking with someone who, he is a native man just like us. And he relives his traumatic experience over and over and over again. It occurs in him repetitiously, many times a week, like it's occurring. So it's not even remembering, it's reliving. He is reliving the abusive experiences over and over and over again. There's a part of the brain called the precuneus and the para-aqueductal gray that measure time and the passage of time. Like I've been talking for probably like 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, and it feels like about that long. It doesn't feel like 4 hours. Maybe to you it feels like 4 hours, but it feels to me like 15, 20 minutes. Because how do we know that? How do we know the passage of time? And that part of the brain says, well, this much time has passed. But when it's failing him, it feels like it's He's 7 years old again, getting beat up, being abused. So the time hasn't passed. It feels like it's in the present. And then when it's in the present, he can't connect, he can't attune to his kids. He can't live his life because he's not in this moment. He's in previous moments. And that's how we scar the next generations, because we can't be with them because we haven't done our cooking yet. So the event is over. It's not occurring. It's stored in me. And once we understand that, we can begin healing, because we're too busy fighting an event that isn't occurring anymore. If you're yelling at your wife, if you're using sarcasm, if you're yelling at your kids, if you can't connect with your kids, we're fighting a battle that is over, but it's present in us right now. So part of our healing process as men is saying, where am I accountable in this? And that's a vulnerable moment, man, dude, that is a vulnerable moment. When you say, yeah, this is what I brought to the table. It doesn't feel good to acknowledge that, but it's the beginning. Because once I recognize what I'm bringing to the table, I start my capacity to address it, to change it, to move it in a different direction, to move it forward. So in unhealthy ways, well, in healthy ways, let's say we started to do our cooking on it, and in our healthy was where we spend more time praying, or spirituality, or exercising, or we're connecting with our friends or our spouse. We're living in the present. In this moment, we're taking care of ourselves. We are genuinely taking care of our family. Now, we look at the fruit that's bearing. Because I can convince myself that I'm doing it, but maybe I'm not doing it that well. I'm gonna say that again, because that's kind of an honest moment with yourself. I can convince myself, yeah, I'm doing good at this stuff. But I look at the fruit that bears. Are my kids feeling, are they thriving? Is my marriage thriving? Or am I too distracted? Am I too in another time to nurture those things? And that's those parts of the brain that are perpetually trying to drag me forward, drag me back. But when I work with folks, I just talk about slowing the game down. Slow the game down, and as much as you can, start practicing being here. What happens with a lot of anxiety and stress is we're creating a hypothetical future. The past isn't occurring, but we're living like it is. Or we are stressing about a hypothetical future that may or may not occur. This may or may not happen, but I'm going to ruin my day worrying if it's going to happen or not. All the different scenarios. So it's taking me out. Both these are taking me out of the present. And the present is where life is happening. That's happened. This may or may not happen. The present is where life is occurring. But we're too busy doing these things for me to connect with my wife, for me to connect with my kids, for me to do my own healing, for me to start taking care of myself, for praying and wellness, because these things keep creeping in. And if this creeps in, maybe we'll smoke then, which is going to affect that part of it. I'll overeat, which is going to affect that part of it. So in the present, working on our wellness and our connectedness and our attunement, that's healing. But here's a really cool part. It's not healing just you. Isn't that awesome? I want to heal my family. I start with me. I want to heal my family. I start with me. Because we affect people. When we make a change, for better or worse, when we make a change, it affects people 3 degrees of separation away from me. And the closer they are, the more powerful the effect is. So here's me, and then my wife's aunties, husband. My wife's auntie's coworker. There you go, let's do that. I make a change. It affects people 3 degrees of separation away from me. My wife's auntie's coworker. By me making a change, positive or negative. So imagine the effect that it has on your first circle that is around you. Me, my wife, my 3 kids. By working on how can I be just that, let's just say that, more present. Not thinking about the what ifs or the what has beens. We can learn from them, but we don't want to live there. Working on this right here. Our prayer, my spirituality, my taking care of the gift of the body that we've been giving, connecting with friends, being attuned, healthy parenting to my kids, healthy husbanding to my wife. That changes things. Now, when they don't, let's say we haven't done that work yet. It can look like self-sabotage. Because with chronic stresses or traumas that a lot of folks have brought up, and there's a lot of shame in it. And there's a lot of, I don't deserve to be happy in that. And so we create ways of minimizing our success. That can look like anxiety. And I want to park here just for a second, because anxiety is just a term that we've given a bunch of sensation bases. My heart's beating fast. My breathing is shallow. I'm tight. I'm tense. I can't think clearly. We label that anxiety, but it's all information. All that is just body information that we give a label to. And by the time we're done today, I really want to emphasize that why don't you wait to label that information and just say, this is information, my heart's beating fast. And then use the tools we're going to talk about to start addressing that. You can start changing the role that information has in your life. It can look like depression. It can look like lateral violence. It can look like physical violence. Drinking, hitting, smoking, using, eating. Really, everything in that list is a way to try to address an internal event. Everything we just listed about my heart being all the stuff like here, or a weight, like I'm depressed, I don't have any energy. So there's ways that we're trying to just fix ourselves, which is not a bad thing. Fixing ourselves is good. We just have to have the right tools to do it. We got to fix ourselves in good ways, in healthy ways, in ways that are going to reverberate generationally. And as I say that, as a man, my dad, Charles Tonamas, lives here in New York, right there in Res. And his dad, Harry Tonamas. And then you go down all the way to Tonmoy, all these men, and let's focus on the men because this is for Men's Health Month, sits in my lap. Whatever they did reverberates in me. How they parented, how they thought, how they lived, any example that they set generations ago sits in my lap today. So how do I think, live, behave, love, attune, connect in my family that my great grandkids can benefit from that? What? Yeah. They can benefit from that. From how I am affects things generationally. My family line, your family line. If you just did really an honest inventory of yourself today and said, oh, okay, what am I throwing into the gene pool? What am I having my kids swim around with in that my grandkids are going to swim around? Because they're going to parent similar to how I parented. That's just kind of how it goes. They're going to parent similar to how I parent. And so if I do an honest inventory, am I empowering things generationally as a Native man, as a father? Let's keep going. So some of these behaviors we're doing are just to survive. And God bless it, you made it. It is June 29th, 2021, and you are here, you made it. God bless it. You made it. But now we can look and say, okay, I've made it. Are these tools necessary to move forward, or are they survival tools? And maybe I can lean into thriving tools from now on. Are my habits about survival? Because I look at my 3 chocolate kids and I want to teach them much more than survival. I want to teach them how to thrive. I want them to be powerful native people. And when I say powerful, I never think about money or status or anything like that. For them, I want them, when I talk about powerful, I want them to be comfortable in their own skin and willing and able to help and work with our community to the capacity that they can. That's what I want. That's power. That's a traditional meaning of power, is how are we lifting each other up? So I don't care if they're rich or not, or if they have the best parking spot in a building or not. I want them to know that they are connected historically, and they reverberate generationally. That's my role. One of my roles as their dad, as the male. But as men, as far as leaning into this healing season now, we're taught to be tough. I think, and I made a decision like at 14 years old up in Standing Rock. I said, well, I'm just done crying over these wedgies and getting duct taped to poles and putting upside down in trash cans. I'm just done crying about all this trauma. And didn't cry for years until I had kids, doggone it. And then they're sitting in a band concert. And I'm just like, oh, I'm so proud of them little buggers. I don't know why I even came to that decision. I don't know why I came to that decision. I'll just stop crying because that's. Did you know that tears have different pH levels? If crying for joy, the tears have a different pH level than if you're crying for stress or anger or anxiety or depression. They all have different meanings. Listen to this. Crying is actually healing. It's the body trying to heal. But we as men are told, don't do that. You can't do that. It's a sign of weakness. And God bless my father. I learned that from him, that he cries when he prays. He cries when he sees his grandkids. He doesn't blubber. He's like, oh. He doesn't do that. But you can see the tears are in his eyes of pride, of feeling the spirit when he's praying. We're also taught not to feel. And those are a gift as well. The capacity to feel. Everything as men is funneled into stoicism or anger. It's funneled out into those things. And blessedly, my kids don't let me do that. They want joy from their father. And what a gift to be able to give them, to say, as an adult man, Jack and Parks, my sons, go ahead and live it up. Smile it up, laugh it up, cry if you need to. But then we're also taught to, well, then just push it down then. Don't just push it down. You don't have to feel that. This is being tough. But here's what we know about research. The body keeps the score. I'll say it. You know what? I got that book right here on my desk. What a nerd I am. This is a nerd fest. It's a nerdorama. The body keeps the score. What does that mean? That means we store all these events even at a cellular level. There's been research that shows that trauma is passed down in our DNA, and it trickles down about 7 generations. No. Am I saying that right? 7 generations. In bug studies and insect studies, they found it goes down 13 to 14, but in humans, it was 3 to 7 generations. And it's stored in the gene. Because how am I going to talk to my great grandson or great granddaughter? I'm not going to have a conversation with that person. How will they know that that I lived, and let's say my dad's generation or his dad's or his grandpa's generation was attacked by a buffalo, and that buffalo thing is stored in me then. So I will drive by a buffalo and I'm like, that, I have no idea why would that happen. But here's really cool. Yes, that's true. They found that it's called methylation. The field of study is called epigenetics. So they found that, yeah, that lives in us. But here's what's really cool is strength was passed down as well. Strength was passed down as well. You're here because many, many generations of people survived attempts to get rid of us. And all the things that help them thrive and survive, as well as the traumas, are present in you sitting in your chair right here today. Isn't that cool? I'm gonna say that again, because it's inspiring to myself that everything that my dad and his dad and his dad and his dad and his dad went through, including genocidal tactics to get rid of them, didn't work. Doggone it. We're sitting here on June 29th having this conversation. It didn't work. Now, what do we do with that gift? What do we do with that gift? How do I take those good things and let them manifest in me and then pass that on to my kids so they can pass it on to their kids? So generations from now, they can look back on you and say, they did all this. They lived through COVID season. Did you know that they had to stay home and use rolls and rolls and rolls of toilet paper? Why the toilet paper thing? Nobody knows, but that's what they did. So when the pushing it down, that doesn't heal anything. We're going from dealing to healing. Pushing it down, ignoring it doesn't heal anything. And here's where we get into the healing part of it. If we could have thought our way through it, we would have by now. I'm gonna say that again. If we could have thought our way through it, we would have by now. If you have had stress or anxiety or depression for any length of time, you're probably a bunch of smart dudes. And you probably looked at it from every different angle. And if you could have thought your way out of it, you probably would have by now. So why do we keep having the same problem, the same episodes? Because the tool's not matching the event. We have to come to understand it in a different way that empowers the body to fight back. It empowers us as Native men to say, I'm reclaiming my sovereignty. I'm gonna do it right now. And it's not as hard as we've been led to believe. One of the reasons we don't go to the clinic is because we don't want to pour out all of our problems and have everybody know everything all about me. And my cousin works at the front desk, and there's the stigma that's connected to all this stuff. So there's things that I'm going to talk with you about just in this last little while we have together. Is how do we start addressing, creating our own sovereignty? A sovereign moment. Where in this moment, well, I do feel like I control myself in that moment. That's a sovereign moment. And then it happens again. And then it happens again. Pretty soon we're just stacking these sovereign moments. And it becomes who we are. Because how the brain fires and wires changes. Because it says, well, we've been doing business this way forever. Whenever somebody says something, we just freak out, or we smoke, or we hit, or we drink, or we use. We get angry, we yell. It says, we've been doing it this way forever. And you're saying we're doing business in a different way now. So it wants to learn you. It wants to learn, well, how are we doing business then? That's sovereignty. I'm saying that again, it sounds smart. It wants to learn you but it's not going to happen by accident because it's going to go on default mode. And trauma, being kind of a jerk, wants this default mode. It doesn't want you to thrive. It doesn't want you to become empowered. It doesn't want you to have sovereign moments. It doesn't want you to raise your kids in good ways. It wants to pass itself down because it's kind of a jerk. But we have the capacity to do it. So let's dive into that. Come on now. I'm getting myself worked up. Oh, and let me just say this. I hear it so often in our communities. Any res, you can hear this. Well, that's just normal how it is around here. We all die of diabetes, or we lose our limbs, or there's abuse, or there's accidents and all over the res all the time. That's just normal. No, it's not. It's common, but it's not normal. I'm gonna say that again. Those are two different things. It's common, but it's not normal. If it were normal, we wouldn't have our kids screaming or having ADHD or having learning problems or having anxiety or depression if it were normal. It's just common. So let's make normal better, different. So let's dive into this right here. Just I'm not sure if y'all have heard me talk about the electricity in the body and the brain, but I'll just do it real quickly because it's really the core of how we understand healing. Because if I'm talking about you, you're not broken or ruined or crazy or anything like that. You've just been built to survive. If you feel out of control, if you can't control your temper or addictions, you're not broken. You're just surviving. And now is the season to thrive. It's the season to start stacking sovereignty for yourself. So it starts with this electrical charge thing. Let's just agree that we're all electrical. That I'm electrical. I'm moving my hand right now because of electricity. There's electrical impulse and it goes down a nerve to a muscle, and it's pretty amazing when you think about it. I'm going to move just my pinky. How do I do that? It's unbelievable. Same with breathing. Same with wiggling your toes. There's some things that we have control over. I can make it do that. I'm not controlling my pancreas right now. I'm not controlling my liver right now. It's kind of doing it all on its own. So I have my little toy here. Here. This needs electricity. It needs a closed circuit. Hey, I'm electrical. I can provide that. There you go. That's me. All me. Still me. Being electrical. Being all electrical up. Okay. So let's go to the brain. Way up here would be right here where your unibrow is. That's where your logic and language and thinking things through and cause and effect and rationale and everything like that lives up here. Way up here. It'd be right here. Way back here is where stress lives, kind of survival, the body sensation stuff lives. That lives back here. So when we have stressful things happen in our lives, and it doesn't have to be a stressful event. Maybe I work with a lot of kids, and I think this is really interesting. I work with a lot of kids who come in and say, the parent will say, "Oh, will you diagnose my boy with ADHD? He's all cry. But I work with a lot of the kids and find out that the mother or father have anxiety, high stress, or they themselves could be diagnosed with anxiety, and that just trickles down to the child. So they're creating an anxious environment, and the child's brain says, "Golly, there is a lot of stress going on here. We're going to need some extra juice to survive in this environment." And so it cranks up the juice to survive this environment. But in a child, that looks like ADHD. So they come in and say, "Will you medicate my child?" No, let's change your environment. let's help the child thrive, let's help you thrive, which is going to help the child thrive. It's going to create the whole system of people thriving instead of trying to survive in a stressful environment. So this guy here lights up when there's a stressful environment. That charge goes way back here to the survival centers of the brain. It goes way back here and just kind of parks. And so let me just clarify this. It doesn't have to be a car accident or an animal attack or a sexual abuse or physical abuse. It doesn't have to be that. It can be kind of chronic underlying stress that maybe mom feels it or dad feels it, and the kids really become the identified patient in that system because they don't know what to do with it. But mom and dad aren't sure how they're going to pay the rent or how they're going to pay the electric bill. And so there's this stress, and the child grows up in a stressful environment because there's no place to run to connect for the non-stressed person for safety. So their body bears the burden. So this guy here lights up and kind of crackles. So then it ultimately looks like I said, in the schools, I get so many calls about ADHD and things like that. But I would say over 90% of the time, you can look at environmental factors for these kids. What's tough about that, though, is the parents don't see it in themselves, because a fish doesn't know that it's in water. A fish doesn't know that it's in water. It just says, here's the world, and here's how I operate in my world. But for a child who's looking to see how are mom and dad approaching the world, it can create stress in that child. So we want to do, and then that grows up into a stressed adult or a depressed adult, which can lead to addictions and behaviors, again, using external tools to address this internal event. But let's work on internal tools for this internal event. And we could spend I spent days in classes talking about this stuff, but I just want to kind of introduce you to that. So once this parks there are the four horsemen of trauma, four horsemen of this chronicness of stress, of this charge, survival parts of the brain. This parks in the survival parts of the brain. One of the things is called hyperarousal. And this doesn't have to be kids. This can be adults. I have hyperarousal. Yeah. So when you get diagnoses of ADHD, in my little smart book of diagnosing stuff, which it's around here somewhere, there's different types of ADHD. One is ADHD inattentive type, where they kind of sit there zoning out, or ADHD hyperactive type, where they're just moving constantly, or there's this ball of energy. And there's ADHD combined presentation. And if I'm talking about you or your child, it's not a curse. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. I get a lot of work done in the day with my hyperactivity, with movement. I'm always, let's see what next. Let's see what is next. Let's see what is next. Blessedly, I don't have the inattentive type where I can't focus, but I honestly think the roots of that were when I was in Standing Rock, that the hyperarousal was what's around me. What's around? There's a part of your brain called the amygdala that kind of is looking for threats in the area. So I could pay attention, but I needed to know what was around, because was somebody going to punch me or give me a wedgie or put me in a trash can? So that kind of stored in me, but I wanted to make sure that worked for me instead of working against me. So part of what we want to do with our kids, first of all, they're not crazy, they're not broken, they're not ruined, they're surviving. So we want to help them harness that and put it towards something in a moving direction. Often when we have kids like this, or maybe this is you, they have trouble with body temperature regulation. They're really hot or they're really cold. They have things, they may be really scared of something. Or they have a lot of fears because they don't know how to harness their bodies. They don't know this information. And so whatever information they get is kind of overwhelming to them. And so they have more fears, or they're uncomfortable a lot. Maybe the tags drive them crazy on their shirts, or sleeves drive them crazy, because they don't know what to do with this information. And so part of the work on that is, well, let's just hang with it and get to know it a little bit better. So there's hyperarousal. Next is constriction. And this could be you. I say kids a lot, but it tracks us into adulthood. I've worked with so many adults who have hyperarousal or ADHD, or there's constriction, which is kind of the perpetual tightening like this. And I work with kids in schools, maybe in the playground, they're walking like this. Maybe they have their hood up. A lot of people in the 20th century, 21st century, will use their phones to dissociate, to constrict, to make the world go from this to this. And so they shrink everything. So a lot of folks with anxiety will do this, like in restaurants, in public spaces, just to constrict or dissociate. We're talking about dissociation next. So constriction, you may look like maybe you have basically perpetually bracing for impact. Maybe it was from being hit or being attacked in some way, or sexual abuse, kind of like this. And so these folks, often they have, they're more likely to have asthma or eczema. Maybe they have skin problems like eczema. They're always tired. They have chronic, because you imagine being like this all the time. They're chronically tired. They may have poor coordination because they're always tight. So there's not fluidity in their motion. And this can lead to a lot of chronic health problems, arthritis, a lot of autoimmune problems, because the body's just not wired to be like this. Dissociation, where they kind of just check out. And they're not doing it on purpose, but it's like they just kind of boom, they're just like that. Because the amygdala, remember that I told you about the amygdala, the guy that looks for stressors in the environment? It picks up on something and says, this is a big deal right here, and you can't do anything about it, so I'm going to check you out. And probably in the middle of that traumatic event or that traumatic moment, if it was a sexual abuse or a physical abuse, it was just better to not be in here. And so a lot of these folks will say, I was beside myself, or I didn't feel like I was in my body. Those cliches come from somewhere. I was beside myself. And so their body just responds and says, well, let's protect you and have you not be in there. And it just looks like they're zoning out. And we do that every now and then. You guys have driven from Lawton to Oklahoma City on 44 going 85 miles an hour, and it takes like 5 minutes because you zoned out at some point. So we all dissociate at some point. The next one is the feeling of numbness. Not knowing how to feel. I hear that a lot, particularly from men. Not knowing how to feel, not knowing what to feel, and here's really important, not knowing how others feel. Not being able to connect with how others feel. All of these are a physiological process. All of these are a physiological process. It's just not this ethereal thing that, oh, it just descended on me and this happens to me. It's a physiological process, it's a brain process. Because my empathy center of my brain lives right here, and it shrinks when I have trauma. My hyperarousal gets parked back here, and that expands for my survival. It gives me the abilities to survive in any given moment. My constriction is a brain function because it helps me to protect. My dissociation is a brain function. So all these, it's just wired for survival. But part of our message today is, let's try a new season. Let's lean into this. Let's make normal different. Let's make it healthy. Let's make it well. Let's reverberate as men, our role in reverberating things generationally. Let's lean into that. What an awesome opportunity. So I want to tell you a little bit today about the vagus nerve. Because if you're not to the point of saying, well, I'm not going to go to the clinic and talk to people and get coached up on this stuff, I get it. I get it. But there's things you can do at home on your own that can start creating the body to be stress hardy. Now let's make that connection. There's a part of your brain here called the thalamus. And the thalamus takes all the information the body gives, sends it up, it comes up here to the neurons in the neck to the thalamus. And the thalamus says, I have this information in the body. What should we do with it? Maybe it's an itch. Maybe you're hot. Maybe you're cold. Maybe your heart's beating fast. And that goes up the thalamus. Now, if we have pretty good control over our stressors or previous traumas, things like that, it goes here to the logic center of the brain. And the brain says, well, you know what? It's more, and it's July, so it's 115 degrees out with 99% humidity. Take your coat off. And then logic says, all right, I'll take my coat off. But if we don't have a lot of control over how our stresses or traumas affect us, it goes to the vagus nerve. And instead of going to the logic center, it goes to the survival center, which is back here. And the survival center says, there's something bad happening. You're hot because there's a fight. You need to fight something, or you need to run away, or you need to be angry. So it's real important to get to know the information your body gives you before we start acting out all crazy, because we haven't harnessed it yet. We haven't gotten familiar with it yet. So the vagus nerve helps us with that. It's one of the 12. It's the 12. There's 12 cranial nerves, and it's the longest of them. And there's a dorsal and a ventral, and it kind of goes through all the major organs in your body and ends up in the pit of the stomach. It goes through all the major organs and ends up in the pit of the stomach. And then it just sends information to the brain saying, here's what the body's got. Here's what the body's got. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? So the weller we are, the more we're working on this stuff, that information, we start to harness it. There's some simple things you can start doing just in your own home. And I know if you don't want to go to therapy or counseling, I get that. But that doesn't mean you should just say, here's how it is. There's in the 21st century, there's things we can do to heal. Go from dealing to healing. The first thing that helps this vagus nerve is actually called the second brain, because the brain takes this information from there. It gives the information to the brain. It's called the second brain. That's how intimate it is. We need to know it. We need to know how it works and the functions that it has in the body. So the first thing it does is it measures the environment. First thing it does is it measures the environment. So all this stuff is happening south of cognition. You're not thinking about it. The body's measuring it for you. We only have about 40 inputs that we can measure at any given time. 40, crying out loud. So right now, I can hear the fan. I can feel what my shirt feels like on my shoulders. What do I feel like in my chair? Am I hot? Am I cold? Am I hungry? Do I have to go to the bathroom? All this, I get 40 of those. The survival centers of the brain are aware of millions of different inputs every second. Right now, millions, 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 just to make sure that you stay alive. It's working on your behalf. One of the things it's doing right now is just measuring if the environment's safe or not. It's just measuring if everything's okay. So have you ever walked into a room where you can tell somebody's been arguing or there's been a fight in that room, and you can just step in and you're like, dang, then you walk out? How did you know that? Do you have some sort of superpowers? It's actually the vagus nerve can, for lack of a better word, it's like a sixth sense. It's like a superpower. And it can pick up on that. So it knows when things aren't safe and when they are safe. Now, the gift that we can give our kids is we are safe for them. That way, their vagus nerve is called vagal tone. It's working really well on their behalf. Their vagus nerve is working really well on their behalf. And so they know when they're not with us, they go off to school or college or Walmart, they know when things aren't feeling safe because they have a baseline for safety in the home. They know what is good. Alcoholism in the home strips that because they don't know what's safe, what's consistent, who's sober, who's present, who's attuned. Alcoholism just strips that. So it limits the gauge for safety in the home. So they go into Walmart and they get into dangerous situations because that vagus nerve said, I don't know what's safe and what's not safe. So one of the things we can do to start healing our family is giving them safety. Letting them know, yeah, I'm here and I'm present, I'm consistent and I'm sober, and you can count on me. That's going to heal the future for them. So us being safe creates that. So how do we start working on that vagus nerve thing? Let's start here. Where did I put it? The first one is simply breathing. I wish it could sound more complicated than that, but it's very simple. It's breathing. It's called heart rate variability breathing. So when we are stressed or we have chronic stress in our lives, we have poor heart rate variability. And what that means is every time our heart beats, there's the lag between the in and out, the dum, 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 isn't the same. That's good. And the more variability, the more not the sameness there is, the better health outcomes are, including stress, anxiety, depression, mental health disorders, physical health, cancers, diabetes, heart disease. The more there's variability in that heart rate, boom, 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 boom. The more there's variability in that, that's called heart rate variability, and that's what we're shooting for. And simple breathing creates heart rate variability. Because when we're stressed, we breathe more shallow. So we're creating less heart rate variability. But I like to use my flute as an example here. So when we breathe in through our nose, which our nose is connected to so many things, our olfactory system, memories, it just activates so many things. And one of the things it activates is called the sympathetic nervous system. That's what gets you jacked up. So when you're doing max bench press, you're doing this like that, you're actually engaging the sympathetic nervous system, which jacks you up to be able to do that 205. Okay? And then when you exhale, that activates the opposite system. The parasympathetic system slows the body down, and it releases acetylcholine, which is a chemical that slows your heart rate, creates heart rate variability. Listen to this now. Parasympathetic, release acetylcholine, slows the game down. It takes this charge off of the stress part of my brain and puts it back here. If we did an fMRI study, which measures the real time, what's going on in the brain, it would shift it just like that. But it needs to be done. There's different researches on it, but the one that I've kind of glommed onto is it's 3 counts in, pause, and 7 counts out like blowing out a candle. It doesn't have to be seconds, just counts. The exhale has to be twice as long as the inhale, or a little more than twice as long. So do that about 6 times. That'll be about a minute. And it looks just like playing flute. So when I play flute, I don't blow because it looks like this. It sounds awful, and the people in the hall complain. When I play flute, I breathe in, and then I exhale. So it looks like. That's about 3 counts in and 7 counts out of not blowing like that, but that's a physiological process. It's not just a good idea. It's a physiological process that slows the brain down, that teaches the brain. We got to know when we feel this level of stress, we have a new sheriff in town. We have a way of addressing this. And it strengthens, it gives you vagal tone, it slows the heart rate, and it's so simple. But it starts with, how do you even know that it's stress? How do you know that? What information are you getting? And I always ask folks, when we start the healing of this system, is what's the first thing that you feel, the sensation base, when you're angry or stressed or have anxiety or depression? Where do you feel it first? I want them to start recognizing that. And the more time you get to know it, practice it today. You can practice this stuff all the time, anywhere. So if you practice it today, if you're driving home, somebody cuts you off. Okay, that's information your body gave you. And maybe you're labeling it anger, or maybe you're getting it road rage. But what you want to do is spend time with it and get to know it. Same thing if you and your wife have a disagreement. If your child kind of pokes the bear a little bit in you, you have the capacity to affect that. And the more you do it, the more sovereign you become. I'm going to give you a few more tools, and then I'll give us about 15 minutes if you have questions or comments or thoughts. Cold exposure affects the vagus nerve. So let me dive into this a little bit. Like cold showers or dipping the face in cold water. So let's say you're prone to anxiety attacks, and you're kind of getting that first information that my heart's starting to be fast, and usually we don't know why. If you feel like, if you've said, I guess I'm just crazy, you know what? Because the why lives up here, and what you're experiencing lives back here. Those are miles apart brain-wise. So the why lives here. So you try to think, why? You know, just don't worry about the why. Why is all hypothetical. Could it be? Could it be? Could it be? Deal with the what. Here's what it is. Here's what the what is. My heart's beating fast. I'm hot. My arms are tingly. My legs are tingly. That's the what. Because the why could be one of a million different inputs. Remember that? The why could be one of a million different inputs. Let's deal with the what. And the what is stuff that we can control. Because the why could be that person walked by and they had the same cologne on as a person who hit me in 3rd grade in cash, and I felt anxiety every time I smelled that. And you may not even know that information. That's why it's hypothetical. The what is this right here. So whenever you get the what information, what is it, where is it, and what is it doing? My heart's right. You can breathe it down. That's one tool. If you have cold water available, you can dip your face and hold your breath. I guess I don't have to tell you to hold your breath when you're dipping your face in water. You'll do it on your own. Okay, so you dip your face in cold water, 3 seconds. Come back up. 3 seconds again. 3 or 4 times, it'll be gone. Not the water, the anxiety will be gone. My daughter, so when we were in Oklahoma, we were living in Norman down on 60th Avenue, heading toward Tecumseh. And 11 years ago next week, 11 years ago in 2 weeks, our house was hit by a tornado. And we were inside of it, and it destroyed the house around us. But it was ultimately why we left Oklahoma and came up here to New York, because New York just has snowstorms, but they are expected. I can tell you in January, there's going to be a snowstorm, and my house will still be standing afterward. Anyway, my daughter since then had her body held on to that. And so we largely got rid of it. She was a constrictor, but we got rid of probably 95% of that, the effect of her in her body, just by these tools I'm talking about. But probably about 5 years ago, Carminda, my wife, she's Navajo from Arizona. She lives in northern Arizona. We flew into Phoenix, and we had to drive up to northern Arizona, which you go through Flagstaff, which is about 8,000 feet. And so we're pulling into Chick-fil-A there in Flagstaff. And she said, "Dad, I feel anxious. I feel anxious, Dad." And so we did these breathing tools. And then a little later on, she had it again. We stayed in Flag that night when she had it again. And so we put the water in the sink, and I said, just dip your thing and face the water, and it worked 3 times, and she was back normal. Come to find out, Flagstaff being 8,000 feet, Phoenix being 2,000 feet, the air was thinner. Her breathing was almost imperceptibly more shallow, which made her heart beat a little bit faster. And her attunement to her body, that part of her brain says, something's going on here that you need to survive. That's why your heart's beating fast. That's why you're breathing shallow. But come to find out, it wasn't anxiety at all. It was just thinner air. But sometimes that communication gets mixed up. That's why a lot of kids who have a lot of traumas get in a lot of trouble in gym class or getting off the bus, because they're hot, they're tingly, their heart's beating fast, and their body says, are we in a fight at home? Is something happening here? And so they get in a lot of trouble. They're not excited, they're angry because there's miscommunication. What we want to do is learn how to harness these things. Breathing, cold water, gargling, another home remedy for poor vagal tone is to gargle just with regular water. It stimulates the muscles around here and the vagus nerve. Well, let me finish the cold thing now. For about a year, I took cold showers, and I just quit when we went out to Arizona for this winter. So I just quit doing it when we went out to Arizona, and I have no reason why I didn't. But I wanted to experiment with it. But the cold, it activates the sympathetic system, the parasympathetic, the slowing of the body down. So if you're going to try it, don't dive into cold water as soon as you get in the shower. I would start on warm, and then when I first started doing a little less warm, but what I ended up doing was probably about a quarter of my shower was in cold, because it affected my vagus nerve. That can also affect health, immune health, and weight loss. So like when I was doing my rinsing off, I would put it on cold. So often I would get out of the shower still fully bubbly because I was done. Gargling, singing affects the vagus nerve. If in church or ceremony, singing at the top of your lungs affects the vagus nerve. Like that guy from Aerosmith, that guy's always in a good mood. You ever noticed that? Singing at the top of your lungs actually stimulates the vagus nerve. It also increases oxytocin, just as an aside. And oxytocin is called the love hormone. So that's all I'm saying. Massage, but gentle, not too hard. Can massage the vagus nerve along your neck and on the carotid. Can stimulate the vagus nerve. Laughter can stimulate the vagus nerve. A good laugh, and that's one of the things that I love about being Native is laughter is a healing tool for us, even down to not just the spirit, but the physiology. It activates the vagus nerve and heals us. And have that be an awesome tool for you. Enjoy laughter. Enjoy when you're laughing. Be present when you're laughing. Then the breathing, and then exercise. Exercise increases brain growth. Hormone supports your mitochondria in the brain. It helps reduce cognitive decline. It stimulates the vagus nerve. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go out and be ridiculous about it. Just go out and walk 10 minutes. And that can help with vagal tone, the breathing, and the movement, the motion that crosses the midline of the brain. So I'm using this half and this half. So I'm just walking, or I'm playing ball a little bit. So you're using your body to heal, which is a very man thing to do since we're having man time. We're using our body to heal. Play with your kids, laugh with your kids. All these things can tie right into family and connectedness. And the last one is relax. Turn the TV off, turn the phone off, let all this input just kind of chill for a second. So the vagus nerve says, okay, so this is our baseline. This is what we're shooting for. So finally then, we're trying to take our wellness, my personal wellness, from dealing with things to healing. And I can use my own body to do this. And when I start doing this, it reverberates. I can help my kids and they help their kids. I become a better husband. My family line becomes more empowered. And that's a challenge for that I just want to drop in our laps and my lap as well. Is make sure that we're doing that. Otherwise, we just had a nice conversation for an hour and a half, but having this nice conversation isn't going to transform our homes or our communities. It's our commitment to it. And I can't expect or want my children to be sovereign or more empowered if it doesn't start with me as their dad. Does anybody, Susan, was there anything in the chat? Or does anybody have a question or comment or thought? She wanted me to leave some time for questions. But does anybody have questions, comments, or thoughts?
I don't see any questions in the chat, but everybody pretty much has stayed here the whole time. So thank you for that awesome presentation. Even though it was directed to men, I did learn a lot. Okay, I see one question here. Tamara, you can go ahead with your question. I saw it said testing. So you can type your question and we will read it to Daryl. So Daryl, while people are thinking or coming up with questions regarding COVID, it has caused a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. How do we get back to, or how do we deal with the stress and the anxiety that COVID has brought on? I know the tools that you give us would be a way to do that, but you know, men have been more affected by COVID in a lot of cases for different reasons. What advice or recommendations would you give in regards to that?
A lot of the tools that we talked about are personal tools, but create community again. As much as you can, create a sense of community. One of the things that is healing is we thrive in communities, but we suffer more when we're alone. So creating community all over again, diving into the family, the extended family, the powwows that are occurring, church, in whatever capacity you create a sense of connectedness. How God put us together, we're very social beings. The brain is a social organism, and it recognizes things around us and heals in those ways. People who have chronic stress or chronic anxiety often limit themselves, often limit their social engagement. So starting to re-engage in those things can start the healing process. We don't want to just deal, we want to heal. And staying connected or regaining connection is one of the main things we can do, as well as the tools that we talked about today. Okay,
so I have some comments here. Thanks for your wonderful explanation of vagus nerve and brain, helpful. Another attendee says, great information. I really enjoyed the generational strength. We always hear about generational trauma. How do we help reduce stigma to help other men heal? Thanks. So that is statement and a question.
Yeah, we hear a lot about generational trauma, and unfortunately, a lot of talks about generational trauma are, here's the awful things that happened to us, and have a good day. But we have to do it in 3 dimensions, that it's in our lap. What do we do with it now? If I can heal myself, I pass on a different genetic coding to my next generation. How can this generational trauma end with me? And what can I do in my own skin, in my own time, that's going to affect my kids? That generational trauma, by definition, does this. So what if it stopped with me? So we know that if I can genetically, if I can address it myself, it affects my kids less and less and less. One of the things that we can do as men is just what I said. We connect and we create communities of healing. I do a study with 5 guys, 6 guys on Tuesdays, just to connect as men to decrease stigma and to promote not dealing, but healing. And it always starts with me. What am I doing? But even bigger than that, who am I being? That's where the healing starts. Okay. What other questions do we have?
Another comment here says, let me see here, I'm sorry, hit the wrong thing. Where did that comment go? There was a comment that says, thanks for your wonderful presentation and expertise. Are there any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions, but people expressing gratitude and appreciation for the session and for what they've learned.
Well, thank you, my friend, for being here. And I hope to see you again soon, maybe face-to-face in Oklahoma at some point.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much what you've shared. And this, by the way, for participants, is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our SBTHB website. You can go to the tab that says programs, and then you will see a list of different grants, and you will find the one that says Making Connections for Mental Health and Wellbeing Among Men and Boys in the US. You click on that, you click on media, and this webinar will be uploaded to that page in probably about a week or 2. So if you want to come back and listen to this again, it will be there and you can direct people. And by the way, we, as part of our Men's Health Month initiative, we relaunched our webpage for this grant, and we have a plethora of resources on that webpage. We have webinars from last year when we did a whole month of webinars for Men's Health Month. We have local and national resources, behavioral health resources, local and national physical health resources, but all with men in mind, different tools that that can be useful. So here you can see it. Idalmi, the program assistant, has pulled up the screen, and there's where you will find that information. If you go back and to the top right, we have our grant goals and objectives, our impact. Go to the media tab so that we can show them where they can find these resources. So here, this webinar will be uploaded. And here we have, if you scroll down, Idalmi, you can see all the webinars and different information that we have there. We have videos, we have podcasts, all of that stuff related to men's health or mental health. So again, we thank you, Dr. Tonamas, for being with us and sharing your expertise, your knowledge. This has been very helpful and healing. And to the participants and attendees, thank you again for attending. And if we have any questions or comments, for Daryl, you can direct them to me and I can get them to him. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you, everyone. Let's thank each other.
Okay, bye. Thanks, Daryl.